I've seen some wild stuff in my life, but nothing prepared me for the day my grandpa, all 5'6" of him, squared up against a pack of HOA goons with his ancient Colt revolver. I'm talking about a man who's seen 2 wars, a depression, and more bar fights than a biker gang, staring down these clipboard-wielding wannabe cops like they were nothing but flies on his porch. This wasn't just a neighborhood spat. It was a full-on showdown that left jaws on the floor and one particular Karen running for cover. You're gonna want to hear this one, 'cause trust me, it's the kind of story that sounds too insane to be true but absolutely happened. So, grab a coffee, settle in, and let me take you back to that summer in 22 when all hell broke loose in our sleepy little suburb. I'm Jake, by the way. 32, single dad, mechanic by trade, living in a quiet little corner of Arizona where the sun's hotter than a jalapeno on a skillet. My grandpa, Earl, moved in with me and my daughter, Lily, after Grandma passed a couple years back. Earl's pushing 85, but don't let that fool you. Has got the energy of a man half his age and a mouth that could make a sailor blush. He's the kind of guy who'd fix your car with a wrench and a prayer, then tell you a story about dodging bullets in Korea while sipping his black coffee. We live in this HOA community not by choice, mind you, but it came with the house I bought cheap after the divorce. It's one of those places with perfect lawns, nosy neighbors, and rules about everything from mailbox colors to how many Christmas lights you can string up. Me? I keep my head down, pay my dues, and try not to ruffle feathers. Earl, though? He's got zero patience for that nonsense. Bunch of busybodies with too much time and not enough sense, he'd grumble, tossing their latest violation notice into the trash. That's where the trouble started. See, our house sits on a corner lot, and Earl's got this thing for his garden. It's his pride and joy: tomatoes, zucchini, roses, you name it. He's out there every morning, watering, weeding, talking to the plants like they're old friends. Problem is, the HOA didn't like his unauthorized flower beds. Too wild, they said. Didn't match the community aesthetic. They sent letters, fines, even a guy in a polo shirt to inspect the property. Earl ignored them all. I fought for this country, he'd say, waving his hand like he was swatting a fly. Ain't no pencil pusher gonna tell me how to grow my damn roses. I tried to play peacemaker, smoothing things over, but I knew it was only a matter of time before Earl's temper met someone dumb enough to push him too far. Enter Karen. Karen, yeah, that's what we called her, though her real name was Deborah. Rolled up one Tuesday afternoon in her golf cart, like she owned the whole damn neighborhood. She was the HOA president, self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, with a perm so tight, it looked like it was strangling her brain. You know the type. Always got a clipboard, a fake smile, and a vendetta against anyone who doesn't bow to her rulebook. She'd been gunning for Earl ever since he told her, at the last community meeting, that her landscaping guidelines were dumber than a bag of hammers. That day, she wasn't alone. She had her little posse, 3 other HOA board members, all decked out in matching khakis like they were auditioning for a suburban militia. They called themselves the Compliance Committee, but Earl dubbed them the HOA Cops. And let me tell you, they were ready to throw down. It started innocently enough. I was in the garage, elbow deep in a carburetor, when I heard Karen's voice, shrill as a dog whistle, barking from the front yard. Mr. Earl, this garden is in direct violation of Section 4, subsection B of the HOA Covenant. I peeked out and saw her standing on our lawn, pointing at Earl's roses like they'd personally offended her. Earl was kneeling by his flower bed, pruning shears in hand, not even looking up. Lady, he said, calm as you please, unless your name's on my deed, you can take your covenant and shove it where the sun don't shine. Oh, man, I knew it was about to go down. Karen's face turned redder than a stop sign, and her posse started scribbling notes like they were building a case for the Supreme Court. Now, I should have stepped in right then, but part of me was curious to see how far this would go. Karen wasn't backing down. She started listing violations: unapproved plants, excessive mulch, even the unsightly garden gnome Earl had painted to look like Elvis. We'll have to escalate this to legal action, she snapped, waving her clipboard like a battle flag. That's when Earl finally stood up, slow and deliberate, brushing dirt off his hands. He's a small guy, but there's something about the way he carries himself like he's seen worse than you and lived to tell the tale. Legal action, he said, chuckling. Darlin', you don't know what you're stepping into. I could feel the air shift, like the calm before a storm. Things escalated fast. Karen must have called in reinforcements, because the next day, a landscaping crew showed up with orders to remove non-compliant vegetation. Earl caught them before they could touch his roses, chasing them off with a rake and a string of curses that would have made a preacher faint. By the end of the week, the HOA had slapped us with a $500 fine and a notice threatening to lien our house if we didn't comply. I was pissed, sure, but I was also worried. Liens are no joke, and I didn't want Earl's stubbornness to cost us the house. I tried talking to him, but he just shrugged and said, "Jake, I've dealt with worse than these clowns. Let him come." I should have known he had a plan brewing, but I didn't expect what came next. Here's where it gets wild. A couple days later, I'm at work when my neighbor texts me, "Dude, there's a news van outside your house." A news van? I raced home, heart pounding, thinking Earl had finally snapped and done something crazy. Turns out, he'd called a local reporter, this guy named Mike, who covered quirky community stories. Earl had spun the whole thing into a David and Goliath tale. Veteran harassed by HOA over his garden. Mike ate it up, and by the time I got home, he was interviewing Earl on the front lawn, camera rolling, while Karen and her posse watched from across the street, fuming. Earl was in his element, charming the socks off the reporter with stories about his military days and his right to grow roses in peace. The segment aired that night, and suddenly, our little neighborhood drama was all over the local news. People were commenting online, calling Karen everything from tyrant to lawn Nazi. I thought that was the twist, but oh, I was wrong. Karen didn't take kindly to being made a fool. She doubled down, and this is where she tried to set her trap. She sent us a letter claiming Earl had threatened physical violence during the landscaping crew incident. Total BS, but she had one of her HOA cop buddies, a guy named Greg, back her up with a sworn statement. They filed a complaint with the city, saying Earl was a danger to the community and needed to be investigated. I was livid. Earl's no saint, but he's not out here threatening people. I confronted Karen at the next HOA meeting, where she played the victim card, dabbing her eyes with a tissue and saying she felt unsafe. The room was split. Half the neighbors thought she was full of it, but the other half, her loyal minions, were eating it up. I started to wonder if we were actually gonna lose this fight. Then came the day of the showdown. The city sent a code enforcement officer to our house, a guy named Tom who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Karen and her crew tagged along, probably expecting Earl to cave. Instead, he invited them all onto the porch for a chat. I was nervous as hell, but Earl was cool as a cucumber. He sat there in his rocking chair, sipping iced tea, while Karen laid into him about the fines, the garden, the threats. Then, real casual, Earl reached into his jacket and pulled out his 1948 Colt single-action army revolver. The thing's a relic, polished to a shine, but very much loaded. The whole group froze. Karen's eyes went wide as saucers, and Greg looked like he was about to bolt. "Now, hold on," Earl said, his voice low and steady. "I ain't threatening nobody. But you come onto my property, trying to bully me and my grandson, messing with my roses? I'm an old man, but I know my rights." He set the Colt on the table, not pointing it at anyone, just letting it sit there like a statement. Tom, the enforcement guy, actually cracked a smile. Turns out, he was a vet too, and he and Earl started chatting about old guns like they were at a bar. Karen tried to interrupt, but Tom shut her down with a look. "Ma'am," he said, "I don't see any violations here, and I'd suggest you stop wasting the city's time." The HOA cop slunk off, and Karen's face was a mix of rage and humiliation. I swear, I could have heard a pin drop. That wasn't the end of it, though. The news segment had gone viral, well, as viral as a local story can get. People started showing up at our house with plants, seeds, even little garden gnomes to support Earl's fight. The HOA backed off completely, probably because their lawyer told them they didn't have a leg to stand on. Karen resigned as president a month later, claiming health issues, but we all knew she couldn't handle the heat. Last I heard, she moved to another state, probably to terrorize some other neighborhood. Earl's garden? Bigger and better than ever. He even started a community gardening club, teaching kids like Lily how to grow their own food. Looking back, I can't believe how it all went down. It's the kind of story you tell at a bar, and people lean in, half expecting you to say you made it up. But that's life, right? Sometimes the craziest things happen when you least expect them. I think about what it means to stand your ground, to fight for what's yours, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Was Earl right to pull out that Colt? Maybe not by the book, but damn, It felt good to see Karen's smug face fall apart. What do you think? Where's the line between standing up and going too far? Drop your thoughts below, and if you like this wild ride, hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, and let me know what you'd do if Karen came for your roses.